This is Dan and you're watching Green Machine Outdoors. Thanks for stopping back into another episode. In today's episode, we are taking a look at the Green Machine. That's our kayak. I'm going to show you how we have it set up for trophy catfishing. Don't go anywhere. Oddly enough, the first piece of our kayak rigging that we're going to talk about is this guy right here. This thing will save your life, okay? It's also a big important piece of how I keep things set up. As you'll see as I go through my kayak, I have some safety features built in, which means it's important to have a way to cut some rope if you need to. Kayaks can get dangerous really quick, especially when you're in a place like the James River that has some current. Now, another important thing is this guy right here. Everybody's got one. It's a good way to get in touch with people if you need them on the water, if you're in trouble. And if you're a tournament fisher like me, that's how you take your pictures. I've got that attached to a lanyard here, tied to my life jacket, so I keep that tethered at all times. This is a lock here that I use for my motorcycle, bicycle, everything like that. It's got a little ring that pops out to help you hold it, and I just have a little carabiner that goes on there. I keep that tucked away in here whenever I need to. If I need to charge it up on the fly, I can put another battery in here with a connector, getting that charged up as I go. I also like to keep my tournament identifiers in here, but right now it's on the kayak, so we'll talk about that over here. All right, so let's dive into this beast and see what we have going on here. One of the best parts about kayak fishing is there's a lot of rigging to do, and it's really fun to play around with it and get it set up just as you want. I've tried to make this video a few times, but every time I want to, I have another piece in the works that isn't quite ready yet. And I figured at this point, things are gonna keep changing. Let's just make a video. If I need to update later, I will. Okay, let's start up here. We've got a little mounting plate. This is gonna house my navigation lights, and it has a quick release puck on it, which I can put my trolling motor on there. I've got a spot lock Minn Kota that I have up there. Contemplating getting a motor guide for a little bit of weight savings. However, there is something more interesting towards the back. So this is actually unused, and that's why you don't see a motor right here at the moment. I'm just using it for navigation lights, or if I need the spot lock for a particular trip. But I actually decided that instead of spot lock, I'd prefer this bad boy right here. This is a Honda 2.3 horsepower outboard. Okay, that's about the maximum that's recommended for a kayak here. The reason I like this is I can take as much gas as I need to. It runs on about 1/3 of a gallon, and that just lasted me my entire trip, and I covered about 11 miles on the water today. Okay, I've got it hooked up to a 1 objectives mount. If I wanted to pop this off, it's just a couple screws, take it out. I've got a safety chain on there in case it ever comes free from the loose, or comes loose from the mount, then it'll be safety chained on there. This little extension right here, I can grab it from my seat, and that helps me start the motor on the fly. This little tiller extension right here, I can operate that from my seat, and it helps me control the throttle. The nice thing about this Honda, there's a couple of nice things about it. One, it's super efficient. Two, it's air cooled. Okay, so you don't have to worry about any kind of impeller or water pump like that. That's less maintenance, and you don't have to worry about running shallow. You're not going to suck mud up there and plug it up. So the fewer times you have to get back here towards the back of the kayak while you're on the water, that's better. And then the other thing that's really nice about the Honda is that it's got no gearbox. It's all done in the throttle. When you start it up, you're in neutral, and then as you turn it counterclockwise, you're just going to shift into gear automatically, and it's going to take off. Okay, it does have a tilt. You just got to break it free from this mount, and then it locks out right here. I've got to tie one more safety chain on that so I can lower it while I'm on the water, because sometimes when I'm trying to pull start it, I accidentally pull the motor up and stow it. This mount's really nice if you have to do any kind of micro anchor or things like that. That's more typically what they're used for, or an electric trolling motor, but it's working good so far. I'll probably move to aluminum at some point, just because I think I'm starting to get a little bit of flex here, especially on those nice hot days. We're starting to get a little bit of bow in that. Okay, when I travel, I've got my safety flag, just so I don't get rear-ended. And I guess it's a good time to talk about how I get by without spot lock after being used to it for so long, and that's this setup right here. I've got my speed in the motor, and I've got my spot lock essentially with an anchor, which is actually my preference, at least for the moment. I have my anchor set up for a quick release system. If I ever get into trouble, I can either grab that knife on my PFD, or I can just slip it off right here. And then this is all gonna pull through the ring right there, and my anchor is gonna detach from the boat. It's got that big old buoy on it to float that rope up so I can come back and grab it later or reattach to it if I need to. I keep that anchor on an anchor trolley that runs about 2/3 the length of my boat. I'm not actually using the Hobie anchor trolley, I'm using a Yak Attack one with just one of the screws in there, and it's working out just fine. Let's talk about rod holders for a minute. I've got Smackdown rod holders, and these bases were made by, if you look at King's Catfish, he's got a YouTube channel. He's got a buddy that made these for him. So these are all stainless steel. It keeps them from turning. Right here you've got this little post that presses against the hull. When we catch really big catfish, it starts to flex. You can kind of see that coming out towards the outside. And that's what a good metal rod holder with that little post is going to do. It's going to help keep everything rigid and help let these circle hooks do what they're designed to do, and that's set in the corner of the fish's mouth. So I've got both of those set up this way. I've got them currently set up in a suspending position. I'm doing a lot of suspend drifting right now, which is why you see a Carolina rig on there. The really nice thing about these rod holders is they have a lot of options. You can go out to the side if you want to get your rods splayed out a lot further. You can go straight on if you want to. You can pop it up here if you're going to do more anchor fishing. So it's got a higher mount on that. And there's just a lot of different options you can do. If you're getting into some really narrow spaces with trees that you got to get skinny, you can point it straight ahead. Just a lot of options with those rod holders. And I've got another set of them back here on my Boondocks landing gear. This actually came pre-installed on my boat that I bought used. However, I don't really use that system. So I just use it to take advantage of the gear tracks and use my rod holders back here. Now same thing here. If I'm anchor fishing, I can have them up like that. If I'm going to be suspending or drifting or things like that, dragging baits, I can pop them right here. When my rods are not in this setup, I'll show you how they are. I'm going to stow them really quick and show you how I spend most of my time traveling. Alright, so I took a roto-molded cooler and bought these rod holders that actually mount right in the slots right there. I had to do a little bit of trimming down to get them to work, but now I can have 3 rods on either side of my cooler. If I need to get back to anything, it's all clear right through there, which is a really nice setup for me. That lets me hold my 4 catfishing rods, which is pretty much what we're allowed for tournaments. And then right now we're fishing for hickory shad a lot, so I've got a spoon set up there on a little Carolina rig. And then that green and black rod you see back there is a dedicated sabiki rod, which is really cool. Let me take you around to that for a second. This is a homemade rod, and everything sucks down into the tube. So you have no sabiki rig hanging out getting caught on everything. It's all housed inside this tube. Is it the greatest rod in the world to fish with? No, but it'll catch bait and it'll keep you from getting everything tangled up, which we know fishing rods like to do. Behind that, I've got my gill net. I've got a 50-foot gill net that I operate off the kayak. If you'd like to see a video on how I use that and how I deploy it from a kayak, I'll post that up top here. I made a video on that a while ago, which did pretty well. Let's move on over to the side here. I've got a little UV light right here that helps light up my rods when I'm night fishing and makes me a little bit more visible. Then I've got a 1-gallon fuel tank right there. I'm currently deciding how I want to run a fuel line. Like I said, the kayak is always developing. Every time you go out, you're looking for a different way to set things up. So I'm trying to get a fuel line to run with a pump back to my fuel cap on my motor. And that way, when the motor runs dry, all I have to do is pump the bulb a few times and it'll fill it back up, instead of climbing back there or finding a spot to beach the kayak and go get it. I've got my pedal drive back here. That's one of the reasons I really like this Hobie platform. I've got options for a motor with tons of weight capacity, the ability for a spot lock motor up front, and I can still have a pedal drive if all else fails. Nobody wants to paddle a kayak with this much stuff on it that's this big. I know they're designed to be paddled originally, but at this point in the game, they're not really designed to be paddled anymore. You don't want to do that. And I do some really long trips, a couple miles out. This is a mount I've just been playing around with. I used to put a light here. I'll show you where I keep that light now once we get up towards the front of the boat. Up in front of here, we've got the Garmin 93U HD. I think there's an SV in there somewhere as well. That's a whole lot of letters, but basically it's a nice, powerful 9-inch graph right next to my seat on a ram ball mount connected to the H-rail. So that's a really easy setup, keeps my graph right next to me. I don't have to reach for it. I can do everything on the touch screen right from my seat without having to bend over. I've got my bait knife behind me right here. And then I've got a Hobie Vantage seat bag behind me. I usually keep snacks and things like that back there, wallet, keys, whatever. Stuff that I'm not really gonna access all that much throughout the trip, but I still don't wanna have to dig in the front hatch for. Okay, right up front here, we've got a 60-inch musky bumper Fat Boy measuring board. Someday I hope to put a catfish on here that covers that whole thing up. Okay, but for now, we're getting towards that 50-inch mark. Okay, this is where I measure my fish. You notice I put some 1/2-inch aluminum channels on there to help lock out that hinge. That helps keep the board rigid so it's not trying to fold down in the middle when we've got those big fat catfish on there. The other thing I really like about the Hobie platform is that I can keep my pedal drive in that slot right there and still have my board where it is. So I don't have to pull that pedal drive out every time I want to throw the measuring board up there. Can I use the pedals when this is up here? No. But if I'm just doing a quick little move between spots, I just pop it up like that and I can go, or I fold it down and pop it up like that, which is no big deal at all. Or I just stow it back next to my seat, which you see a lot in my videos. I'm always having to go dig for it because I like to have this front area as open as possible. It's also like a nice little work table. I keep a little Yak Attack base mount up here. That's where I'm going to start mounting my light. I'm trying to always improve my night fishing videos. They're always very dark. It's just one of the biggest challenges when you're night fishing in the kayak. So I'm playing around with different light setups, and I'm gonna get a really tall light post in there and see if that helps out. I've got my fish grips in here. I don't have a landing net on this boat. As you see, there's a whole lot going on back here already. So I'm not gonna bring a landing net out here. If I can't get it with my bare hands, or it's a little fish, or there's a risk of getting a hook in my hand, I'll use the fish grips, which you see a lot more in my videos recently. And aside from that, I just have a glove next to the seat, which is my paddle right there while we're looking at it. But I've got a glove right there that helps me grab those fish so they don't tear me all up. And here's a view of what that all looks like from inside the kayak. I'm sure you're used to this view if you're a viewer of the channel, but it just seems like a good place to finish out the front end of this boat up here. Right here, these are the identifiers for the tournaments I'm currently in. Part of being in a kayak fishing tournament is you've got to get the length of the fish with a specific identifier in there so we can tell that it happened within a certain time period. So a picture from up here, that works out to be a good spot for me to get my identifiers in there. And you probably see this little setup in a lot of my videos. I've got a PVC post going down into the Hobie mast mount right here. Okay, and that helps, you can do pretty much whatever you want with it from there. I've got some ram ball attachments up here with a 3-way ram post, so I can adjust that and articulate it however I need to. I've got a spot right here I can put my cell phone if I'm doing a YouTube live or anything like that, and I've got my GoPro up here. So if you see me out in the water and I look like I'm talking to myself, I'm probably just talking to one of these two cameras, which is becoming more and more natural, I guess, even though it's always kind of strange. You got the rod tubes in here. I don't really use them at all. I actually have them plugged because water can get in there, which eventually makes it down into the hull, and it can actually get around the outside too. So I'm in the process of getting this cleaned up so I can get some marine goop on there and try and seal that up a little bit better. When I'm not using Santee drifters, these are the drifting weights that I use. You can find those on a tutorial from Kayak Catfish. Pretty easy DIY. They're about 6 ounces and they get through some really nasty stuff that even the Santee drifters get hung up in sometimes. But a lot of the James River is a mud bottom, so the Santee drifters are a lot easier to manage. As you can see, these are already kind of hard to put back in. But I like to keep those there just in case I get into some really heavy cover. Moving to the front, this is probably one of the more exciting pieces. It's kind of like when you watch MTV Cribs and they finally show you what's in the fridge. We'll show you what's in the front hatch. And that's one of the selling points of a Hobie, is just how much storage you have up here. You can fit whatever you need to in there. If you take this bucket out, you actually have even more storage. But I've actually got some water issues that I was talking about, those rod holders I haven't sorted out yet. So I don't really take that out. I just keep it as dry storage. Drone, umbrella that I use for sun and rain, toilet paper because, you know, some extra rigging. And then right now I've got a little shad box with me with all kinds of darts and jigs and weights and spoons. This is kind of like my tackle box in here. It's got GoPro batteries, mounts, things like that, charging cables, all that good stuff. Sometimes I throw some snacks in there. This time of year we gotta start having the sun shirt out, which is nice. Finally getting some nice weather out here. Extra batteries. I tried buying these solar batteries, but they don't really seem to charge all that well, so they're just power banks at this point. And that's really all I have in my front hatch. I don't access it too much. I've got some wiring underneath there that all goes down to this little hatch in here. And I've got a charging port in here for cell phones, power banks, things like that. It's just got your cigarette style outlets that I can plug into my battery. I've got a battery right behind this, if you can picture that inside the hull. That's a 48 amp hour 16 volt battery. So that keeps my graph running literally for a month at a time. And the good news is it dies at 12 volts, so you've always got a crystal clear picture no matter what. Inside of here, I've got a big float if I'm gonna do some live bait fishing, extra rigs, sunscreen, wrench for my rod holders if I need to, gloves in case it's really cold out and I don't want to get my hands super wet, some extra hooks. This is just kind of like my junk drawer. And then a lot of my wiring goes in behind that hooks up to all my switches up here. All these switches are some extra rigging that I did. That's for the trolling motor. If I'm gonna have it up on the bow, I plug it in here. This is a little two-prong SAE port that I plug all kinds of accessories into, whether it's a light. I have a little underwater light that attracts bait fish that's green. I can plug that in, whatever. I could even charge my battery through that if I wanted to. And here I have 2 USBs. That's good for charging phones, GoPros, whatever. A lot of times I'll run a cord down from my from this GoPro right here, my one that faces me, and do that. All right, well, there you have it. That is my kayak fishing rig. I tried to be about as thorough as I possibly could. One thing I may have forgotten to mention is what anchor I'm using, and that would be a Never Lost anchor. Those things are pretty awesome. That's their kayak specific one with some chain on there. So check them out if you're in needs of an anchor, something that won't let you move anywhere. Like I said, we've got a mud bottom in the James with some pretty strong currents. Once that thing hits the bottom, it gets sticky and it doesn't go anywhere. But I think that's about it as far as I can tell. If there's anything you'd like to hear more about, write it down in the comments section below, and we'll either do a follow-up video or answer some questions. But thanks for checking it out. We hope to put a lot more catfish in this big bad beast right here, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later.